Hello, my name is Susan Sharp. Welcome to the presentation of my dissertation proposal defense. The topic of my dissertation is Meeting the Needs of Students with Disabilities in Supplemental Online Programs, Exploring the Functioning of IEP Teams Online. When I began my time in the Educational Technology doctoral program, I was a general education teacher at Michigan Virtual School. There I encountered students with disabilities, students in special education, and we really struggled to get that information, to find accommodations that would work in the online setting. And that was just an area of concern of mine that I carried with me. And when I got to choose a research study for my dissertation, I returned to those thoughts of how can we support students with special needs in supplemental online programs. To introduce my research, I would like to begin with two important definitions. The first one is supplemental online program. Supplemental online program is defined as an online program that allows students to take less than a full load of online courses as defined by local or state entities. It can also be referred to as a part-time online program. The other definition is of special education director. According to the National Association of State Directors of Special Education, this role ranges from the level of the individual school building to the federal government and is a person who is responsible for the successful implementation of educational policies and programs for students with disabilities. With the growth of online education, students with disabilities are participating in supplemental online programs in the same increasing numbers as their general education peers. Students who have been identified as having a disability have a team of individuals, educators, specialists, school leaders, and their own parents collaborating together on their behalf. The plan that this team develops is the Individual Educational Program, or IEP. The group is the IEP team. Special education directors are responsible for the functioning of IEP teams as they support students with disabilities as they participate in supplemental online programs. They are in the position to describe the processes used by IEP teams when their students are enrolled in supplemental online programs. The purpose of this study is to identify the needs of students with disabilities in supplemental online programs and determine if they are being met, and to identify the processes used by IEP teams to support students with disabilities in supplemental online programs and to determine the effectiveness of those processes. I identified 4 research questions. The first, what are the needs of students with disabilities enrolled in supplemental online courses? Number 2, are the needs of students with disabilities being met in supplemental online programs? Number 3, what are the processes IEP teams use to support students with disabilities in supplemental online courses? And number 4, do the processes IEP teams use in supplemental online programs effectively meet the needs of and support students with disabilities? This table shows the alignment of my 4 research questions to the data collection and the instruments and the data analysis that will be used. I chose a mixed method for my research study. There will be a phase 1 quantitative portion that is a survey that will answer the research questions, and then a phase 2 qualitative portion that will be interviews that will further answer those research questions, but also more fully describe the process used by IEP teams to support these students. I'd like to touch on the major topics of my literature review. I had 3 main sections: special education, definitions and history, supplemental online programs, and IEP teams online. The first major topic of my literature review was special education definitions and history. There was an overview, a focus on special education leadership, the IEP team, special education online, and attrition and failure of special education students in online education. The second major topic focused on supplemental online programs, again with an overview, a discussion of enrollment of students with disabilities, the needs of students with disabilities in supplemental online programs, and the success of students with disabilities in online education. The final section of the literature review was on IEP teams online, again with an overview, and then a discussion of leadership of IEP teams in supplemental online programs, followed by processes used by IEP teams of students in supplemental online programs. The problem I wish to address through my research is that without IEP teams being integrally involved in the determination of whether or not a particular online learning environment or a supplemental course is an appropriate placement for a student with an IEP, improper placements and faulty interventions leading to student failure may occur. The theoretical framework for my study was based in sociocultural theory. Lev Vygotsky had a close connection with special education that was very, very interesting to explore. His work on learning and development showed that learning does not occur in isolation. It's not an individual task. Students with disabilities develop within the social implications of their quantitatively measured condition. Learning takes place when the individual can use the symbols and the tools of their culture, and it requires interaction with mature and experienced members of a student's culture engaging with the learner. It's difficult and probably not appropriate to apply current labels and approaches to Vygotsky's terminology, but he saw the deviations within special education to be a natural environment in which to study the learning process in the themes of culture, language, and the zone of proximal development. It's very easy to apply the zone of proximal development to accommodations and student support for special education. Students need this team through the IEP team. They need teachers and educators coming around them to support them. The IEP team is tasked with creating that relationship and those connections to allow those students to learn at their fullest potential. The review of literature and the two phases of this research study will address all four of the research questions to varying degrees. The Chapter 2 literature review gathered preliminary information on research questions 1 and 2 and framed the data collection for questions 3 and 4. The Phase 1 survey will address all four research questions, and the Phase 2 interviews will collect data to address research questions 1 and 3. The Phase 1 survey has 50 items. The items were developed out of the review of the literature associated with the study, and items were also purposely selected or adapted from the program review tool Assessing and Improving Special Education, which was published by the Center on School Turnaround, and also purposely selected or adapted from the National Standards for Quality Online Learning. There are a selection of multiple choice items, there are Likert items, Likert scale items, and also some short answer questions. The sample for my study were special education directors in Michigan. Special education directors in Michigan as defined by the National Association of Special Education, which means that they have oversight of special education programs and policies. This means that I might be encountering people with many different titles and roles within their school or organization. The participants for the survey will be identified from the Michigan Association of Administrators of Special Education online directory and supplemented by public directories of school district staff and administration from the Michigan Department of Education. Michigan Virtual School published the list of the 417 public school districts from which they enrolled students. The sample will cross-reference MACE members with Michigan school districts that have enrolled students at Michigan Virtual School. Although the sample will not be limited to supplemental online programs from Michigan Virtual School, this should give us a good sample of special education directors in districts that are likely to have students with disabilities in supplemental online programs. The Phase 2 qualitative portion of our mixed method study is a series of interviews. After the Phase 1 survey data is collected, those results will determine the focus of the Phase 2 interviews. Phenomena of interest would be associated with the needs of students with disabilities and with the processes used by IEP teams who support them in supplemental online programs. The interviews will be recorded, transcribed. After reading the transcripts, segments will be coded, and then the coded segments will be grouped by themes for further analysis. Out of the surveys, it is definitely hoped that we will find some special education directors who are able to describe at further length what they are doing, what their IEP teams are doing, and what those processes are when they're serving those special education students enrolled in supplemental online programs. The reason for doing these qualitative interviews is to dig down and really get more information on those IEP teams and how they really are working to support this particular population of students. In terms of my data collection and analysis, for my quantitative survey, I plan to use descriptive statistics, including frequencies, central tendency, mean, median, mode, and also measures of dispersion such as standard deviation. For my qualitative portion, I'll be identifying themes and also using member checking. I'm going to return to the research questions, break those down, and tie some of those themes back to make sure that I am addressing my qualitative themes to my research questions. The scholarly significance of my study is that it will serve educators and students. It will enhance the relationships among the members of IEP teams, identify the needs of students with disabilities in supplemental online programs, and determine if they're currently being met. It will describe the functioning of effective IEP teams and their support of students with disabilities. It will improve effective accommodation for students with disabilities. And it will increase the success and positive outcomes for students with disabilities in supplemental online programs. Again, to bring it to the specific circumstances we're dealing with today with the coronavirus, educators all over the country are trying to figure out how to replicate what's done in a face-to-face setting with students who are in their homes. And so the functioning of the IEP team, it's really, really important that we look at that now and come up with ways that it's working effectively for supplemental programs, but also to be able to give us some of those pictures of how it can work when the students are not within a brick and mortar building in front of us. My timeline for this research study is that after acceptance and approval of the proposal, data collection will occur approximately from June 1st through October 1st. There needs to be some flexibility here. I'm certainly hoping that since we have many school staff members who are working remotely, they may encounter my survey and have extra time with which to complete it. But I need some flexibility where some of the people in my target population may be extremely busy and others might have some extra time. But that's why I'm giving it kind of a broad window from June 1st to October 1st of this year. Again, this will allow for participants to be identified and contacted while school's in session and while those employees are active, and also some follow-up contact with the special education directors during those times of potentially lower workload during the summer months. It'll also give me a little bit of time after the beginning of the new school year if I need to further track down some of the participants after they've gone back to school in the fall. Data analysis and summarizing of the outcomes will be completed and in final format by the middle of November of this year. Again, I thank you all very much for your consideration of my proposal, and I look forward to your suggestions and input throughout this process. Thanks again.